grief has a sound. For me, it was the slow, uneven beep of the hospital monitor as my grandfather's chest rose one last time. He was more than a grandparent. He was my anchor, the one who told me I was strong even when my own family called me bloodless Sadie, as if kindness meant weakness. That same afternoon, while I sat at my office desk still hollow from loss, the door burst open. My sister Clara stormed in, flanked by 4 lawyers in sharp suits. She slapped a stack of papers onto my desk. "Sign over Grandpa's estate," she sneered. "Or face court, little bloodless sis." The room spun. My grief curdled into something else. Resolve. I poured tea into porcelain cups, let them gloat, and whispered, "Sure. Everything will be settled tomorrow morning." But not the way they thought. My name is Sadie, and I lost the only person who ever truly believed in me. Grandpa Samuel had been my guide through every storm. When my parents mocked me for being too quiet, too gentle, he would squeeze my hand and say, "Still water runs deep, Sadie. Don't let them mistake silence for emptiness." When he passed, it felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. The hospital smell of antiseptic clung to my hair. My eyes stung with unshed tears as I stumbled into work, trying to keep my hands busy so I wouldn't break. But grief didn't get the chance to breathe. Clara, my older sister, had always been different. Bold, loud, entitled. She thrived on attention and believed inheritance was her birthright. And that day she proved it. The door to my office slammed against the wall, and there she was, dressed in black like she'd come from the funeral, but her eyes weren't wet. They were blazing with hunger. 4 lawyers fanned out behind her, their briefcases snapping open. Clara dropped thick papers in front of me. "Grandpa left a will," she said flatly. "But we're contesting it. We'll drag you through court unless you sign everything over now. It'll be easier if you just surrender." Her words cut sharper than my father's on my worst birthdays. I wanted to scream, "How can you talk about estates when his body isn't even cold?" Instead I sat still. My hands shook as I reached for the teapot on my desk. I poured into 5 cups, the sound of liquid filling porcelain louder than my heartbeat. I forced my voice calm. "Tea." The lawyers glanced at each other, confused. Clara smirked like I was pathetic. "Don't stall, Sadie. We know you. You don't fight. You don't win. Just sign." Inside, my grief sparked into a flame. Grandpa's voice echoed, "Still water runs deep." I looked Clara dead in the eye and smiled faintly. "Of course. Everything will be settled tomorrow morning." They leaned back smug, certain I'd fold like always. But behind my calm face, a storm was gathering. 'Cause I had a secret. One Grandpa had left only for me. The moment Clara and her lawyers left my office, the silence cracked wide open. My tea had gone cold, untouched. The papers they'd shoved at me still lay across my desk like a threat carved in ink. I pressed my palms flat against the wood and whispered to myself, "Don't let them see you shake, Sadie. Not this time." All my life, Clara had been the golden one. She knew how to smile sweetly at relatives and still slice me open with her words when no one was looking. "Bloodless Sadie," she used to hiss, mocking my calm nature. No fire, no fight, no heart. But she had no idea that Grandpa Samuel had entrusted me with something none of them knew existed. The night after the funeral, while the family argued in the kitchen, Grandpa's lawyer, Mr. Hayes, had pulled me aside. His voice was low, his hand heavy on my shoulder. "Your grandfather asked me to give you this privately," he said, slipping me a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter, written in his familiar, careful script. "Sadie, my quiet strength. They'll come for what isn't theirs. But remember, the true inheritance isn't in the house or the accounts. It's in the clause. Protect it. You'll know what to do." The words burned into me like fire through paper. A clause. First I didn't understand. But that night, I'd sat with Hayes and read through the official will. Everything seemed normal, until I reached the addendum. A clause buried on the final page. It stated, No asset or property shall transfer until 1 year of stewardship is completed by the designated heir, proving their ability to sustain and grow the estate. That heir is Sadie. Me. Not Clara. Not my parents. Me. If I failed, it would revert to charity. Not to my sister, not to my mother, not to anyone else. Grandpa had tied the fortune to discipline, patience, and quiet strength. He had chosen me, the one they all dismissed. Now it made sense. Clara wasn't here because she cared about Grandpa. She wasn't here because she thought the estate was rightfully hers. She was here because she knew the clause shut her out. She was desperate. And desperate people get dangerous. That night, back in my apartment, I spread the papers Clara had given me across the kitchen table. Their lawyers had drawn up contracts demanding I voluntarily relinquish claims to the estate. I almost laughed. They thought intimidation would work. They thought fear would break me. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I pulled out Grandpa's letter and placed it beside the documents. His handwriting, steady and sure, felt like a shield. You'll know what to do. And I did. Tomorrow morning, when Clara expected me to hand over everything, I would bring the clause. The real will. Not only would she lose, she would lose publicly. Still, my stomach twisted as I tried to sleep. I knew Clara wouldn't accept defeat gracefully. She was fire and rage, and if she couldn't get her way legally, she'd find another path. My phone buzzed past midnight. A message from an unknown number. Sign tomorrow or you'll regret it. I stared at it, my hands cold. She was already playing dirty. But she had underestimated me like always. Grandpa once told me, Sadie, silence isn't weakness. Strategy. Let them think you're quiet, then strike when the moment comes. Tomorrow morning I would strike. And when I did, Clara's empire of arrogance would crack wide open. The next morning, I walked into Mr. Hayes's law office with my grandfather's sealed letter tucked safely in my bag. My heart was steady, but my hands trembled faintly as I poured myself tea from the urn in the corner. Ritual. Just like Grandpa had taught me. The conference room was already buzzing when I entered. Clara sat at the head of the long mahogany table like a queen awaiting her coronation. Her 4 lawyers lined one side, their suits crisp, their pens ready. My mother and 2 uncles filled the other seats, their expressions expectant, hungry. I took the chair directly across from Clara. She smirked, tilting her head. Enjoy your last morning as the little bloodless sis. After this, you'll have nothing. I said nothing. Just smiled faintly and poured myself tea. Mr. Hayes cleared his throat, shuffling papers. As executor of Samuel Wright's estate, I will now read his last will and testament. He began with the formalities, naming his children, his grandchildren, appointing Hayes as executor. Clara sat taller with every line, her chin tilted, her nails tapping the wood. Then Hayes read aloud the allocations. Properties, accounts, stocks, art. The room hummed with whispers, pens scribbling. Clara's grin widened. But then Hayes paused. He pulled out the final page. His voice slowed, deliberate. And here we reach the addendum. It states, no asset or property shall transfer until 1 year of stewardship is completed by the designated heir, proving their ability to sustain and grow the estate. That heir is Sadie Wright. The room went still. Clara's smirk collapsed into disbelief. What? Hayes repeated it clearly. The heir is Sadie. Gasps echoed. My uncles shifted uncomfortably. My mother muttered, that can't be right. But Hayes placed the notarized document flat on the table. His eyes, calm but firm, left no room for doubt. It's signed and sealed by your grandfather. This is his wish. Clara shot to her feet, slamming her palms against the table. No, this is a mistake. Sadie can't run an estate. She's useless. Grandpa always said. I cut her off, my voice quiet but sharp. Grandpa always said silence isn't weakness. Strategy. You underestimated me, Clara. Just like you always have. Her lawyers shuffled uncomfortably, exchanging looks. They knew the clause was airtight. Still Clara wasn't done. Her voice shook with fury. "We'll contest it. We'll take her to court." Hayes adjusted his glasses. "You're welcome to try. But this clause is ironclad. If Sadie fails stewardship after 1 year, the estate goes not to you, but to charity. Not a single penny reverts to you." The blood drained from Clara's face. Charity. That one word hit her harder than any insult. The room buzzed with low murmurs. I felt all eyes on me. The quiet sister, the background shadow, suddenly sitting at the center. My mother's lips trembled, her voice thin. "Sadie, be reasonable. You can't do this alone." I lifted my teacup, steady hands wrapping the porcelain. "I don't have to be loud to be capable. I don't have to be ruthless to be strong. Grandpa believed in me. And now, so will all of you." For once, no one had a retort. Clara's fists clenched at her sides. "This isn't over," she spat, eyes blazing. I smiled faintly. "No. It's just beginning." The meeting adjourned, but Clara stormed toward me before I reached the door. Her breath was hot, her words venom. "You think you've won, Sadie? You think one piece of paper changes who you are? I'll ruin you. I'll drag you through court, through headlines, through every room until you break." I leaned closer, my voice a whisper only she could hear. "You can try. But every move you make now is against Grandpa's will. And the world will see it." Her face twisted. She wanted to scream, to hit, to claw, but her lawyers pulled her back. I walked past them calmly, letter safe in my bag, heart pounding with a strange mixture of grief and fire. Because the battle wasn't finished. It had only just begun. The days after the will reading felt like walking through fire. My phone buzzed non-stop with messages from relatives, neighbors, even old family friends. "Sadie, why didn't you tell us? Clara says you tricked Grandpa into changing the will. Is it true you threatened legal action against your own family?" All of it. Clara had wasted no time launching her campaign. By the end of the week, whispers spread through town that I was greedy, manipulative, ungrateful. At the grocery store, I overheard 2 women by the apples. "Did you hear? Sadie's taking everything for herself." I wanted to scream, I didn't take anything. Grandpa entrusted me with it. But instead I lowered my eyes and walked on. Then came the newspapers. Clara had money, connections, and she used them well. Articles appeared with headlines. "Sister Sparks' family feud over estate. Quiet sibling accused of manipulating grandfather." My chest tightened with every word. It felt like drowning, like my voice was being stolen all over again. But that night, as I sat in my apartment surrounded by unopened letters and buzzing phones, I remembered Grandpa's words. "Silence isn't weakness. It's strategy." I couldn't win by yelling louder than Clara, but I could win by showing the truth. The next morning I went to Mr. Hayes's office. His expression was grave but steady. "She's spreading fast, Sadie," he said, sliding newspapers across the desk. "But remember, public noise doesn't win cases. Evidence does. And you have it." I nodded, my throat dry. "She won't stop though. She'll destroy me if I let her." Hayes leaned forward. "Then don't let her. Use what your grandfather gave you. Stewardship isn't just a legal clause. It's a chance to prove yourself. Run the estate wisely, grow it, show the world you're capable. That's your strength, not her noise." For the first time since Grandpa's death, I felt a flicker of hope. But Clara wasn't finished. 3 nights later, I came home to find a letter slipped under my apartment door. My blood ran cold as I read it. "You think you're clever, but you don't know what Grandpa hid. Keep pushing me, and I'll bury you with it." No signature. But I knew the handwriting. Clara's. What could she mean? What did Grandpa hide? Curiosity sparked through my fear. Maybe there was more to the estate than even I knew. I dug through Grandpa's old files, the ones he'd left stacked in the cedar chest at my apartment weeks before he died. Receipts, land deeds, letters. And then, at the bottom, a folded map with a single line written in his careful script. "For Sadie." Trust comes with truth. Map. To what? The next morning I followed it. It led to Grandpa's old countryside workshop. Dust layered the shelves, cobwebs hung in the corners, but the place smelled faintly of cedar and oil, like him. In the back, under a tarp, I found a locked chest. My heart pounded as I pried it open. Inside were ledgers, journals, and sealed envelopes, all documenting decades of estate transactions. Every account, every detail. But there was more. Letters. Handwritten, each addressed to me. The first one said, "Sadie, if you're reading this, it means they've come for you. But remember, the truth is your shield. Everything you need to defend yourself, and the estate, is here." Tears blurred my vision. He had prepared for this. For Clara. For everything. That night, as I sat surrounded by his letters, I realized something. Clara had her lawyers, her lies, her noise. But I had Grandpa's truth. And I wasn't alone anymore. Because when word spread about Clara's smear campaign, something surprising happened. Neighbors I'd grown up with, quiet, kind people who had known Grandpa, started reaching out. "Sadie, your grandfather always trusted you. We do too. Don't let her bully you. You're stronger than you think." For the first time I felt support. Clara wanted me isolated, but instead she had given me a community. And as I tucked Grandpa's letters back into the chest, I whispered to myself, "This isn't the end. This is where I fight back." The summons arrived on a gray Monday morning. A thick envelope stamped with the county seal sat on my desk like a warning bell. Clara had filed for an injunction, demanding the court strip me of stewardship and hand everything to her. My stomach knotted, but when I opened the envelope, Grandpa's letter in my cedar chest whispered to me, "The truth is your shield." So I gathered my shield. The courtroom smelled of wood polish and tension. Clara sat across from me, her lawyers lined like soldiers. She looked triumphant, her chin high, her lips curved in a smirk. When the judge asked her counsel to speak, their words poured like poison. "Your Honor, our client believes the heir, Sadie Wright, is unfit to manage this estate. She has no record of financial stewardship, no business experience, and has been estranged from her family. Furthermore, we have reason to believe she manipulated her grandfather in his final days to alter the will." Gasps rippled through the gallery. My cheeks burned, but I stayed still, fingers curled around the folder of Grandpa's documents. Finally the judge turned to me. "Ms. Wright, how do you respond?" I rose slowly, heart pounding but voice steady. "Your Honor, I am not here to argue with noise. I am here with truth." I laid the ledgers and journals on the table. These are records my grandfather kept for decades. Every transaction, every investment, every detail of how he built and sustained his estate. And alongside them, his letters to me. I held one up, his handwriting looping across the page. He entrusted me with stewardship because he knew I would protect his legacy, not exploit it. These aren't the words of manipulation. They're words of trust. Clara's lawyers tried to object, but the judge silenced them, examining the pages. He lingered on the notarized signatures, the consistency of the handwriting, the dates that stretched back decades. "This is compelling," he said finally, his brow furrowed. Clara slammed her hand on the table. "She's lying. She's always been weak, bloodless. Grandpa would never choose her." I turned, meeting her fury with calm. "He did choose me, Clara. Because silence isn't weakness. It's strength. And unlike you, I don't need to scream to prove it." The gallery stirred. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker across faces that had believed Clara's smear campaign. When court adjourned, Clara stormed out with her lawyers snapping at her heels. But I stayed behind, packing Grandpa's documents carefully back into the folder. Mr. Hayes approached, a rare smile softening his stern face. "Well done, Sadie. You didn't just defend yourself. You proved you're the steward Samuel believed you were." I exhaled slowly, the weight lifting from my chest. It wasn't victory yet, but it was the first time I had stood up in public and not crumbled. The first time I felt like maybe I could win. That night, back in my apartment, I sat with one of Grandpa's letters in my lap. Sadie, when they push, don't bend. When they shout, don't shout louder. Understand. The truth will do the rest. I smiled through tears. I'm standing, Grandpa. I'm finally standing. The victory in court rattled Clara more than I imagined. For a few quiet days, I thought maybe she would retreat, lick her wounds, and finally leave me alone. But Clara never surrendered. On Friday morning, I opened my email to a storm. Anonymous tips sent to local reporters. Sadie forged documents. Sadie drained Grandpa's accounts before he died. Sadie blackmailed Mr. Hayes. The lies spread like wildfire. By noon, headlines screamed again. By evening, a news van idled outside my apartment building. I shut my curtains, heart racing. Clara wasn't just fighting me legally anymore. She was trying to destroy me completely. That night, I went to Grandpa's workshop. Surrounded by the cedar smell and the boxes of his journals, I found strength. I flipped through his records, searching for anything Clara could twist against me. And that's when I found it. An envelope labeled, "For court if needed." Inside was a notarized addendum Grandpa had written 6 months before he passed. It outlined not only the stewardship clause, but his reasoning. My heir, Sadie, has demonstrated honesty and patience. My other descendants have pursued selfish gain. This estate must not fall into their hands. My throat tightened. He had known this war was coming. He had armed me for it. The next court date arrived with tension thick as smoke. Clara strutted in, head high. Her lawyers smirking as if they had already won. Her counsel rose. Your Honor, we have evidence the defendant misled the executor, manipulated records, and is unfit for stewardship. The judge frowned. Do you have proof? They hesitated, shuffling papers, rumors, blog posts, anonymous claims. Nothing solid. Then it was my turn. I stood, voice calm, steady. Your Honor, I anticipated this. My grandfather did too. I handed over the sealed envelope. Hayes confirmed the notarization. The judge read aloud the words that burned like fire across the courtroom. My other descendants have pursued selfish gain. This estate must not fall into their hands. The gallery buzzed. Clara's face drained of all color. I turned to her, finally allowing myself to speak directly. You tried to twist lies into truth. But Grandpa left me with truth that cannot be twisted. He saw you, Clara. He saw your greed. And he chose me. Clara leapt to her feet, her voice shrill. She doesn't deserve it. She's weak. She's nothing. But the judge's gavel cracked down. Enough. This court finds that the will and its addendum stand unchallenged. Stewardship remains with Sadie Wright. All further contests will be dismissed with prejudice. Bang. The sound echoed like thunder. Clara slumped back into her chair, eyes blazing with hatred but powerless. Her lawyers whispered frantically, already planning their retreat. And me. I stood taller than I ever had in my life. When the hearing ended, I walked out into the crisp air, shoulders lighter. Hayes walked beside me, his voice low. Samuel was right. You didn't need to shout. You just needed to stand. I nodded, a smile tugging at my lips. And now, it's finally over. But as we stepped into the sunlight, I realized something. It wasn't just over. It was only the beginning, my beginning. The day the judge's gavel came down for the last time, I walked out of the courthouse into sunlight that felt different. Warmer. Softer. For weeks, I'd been drowning in grief, rumors, and attacks. Clara had thrown every weapon she had. Lawyers, lies, headlines. And yet I was still standing. Not because I screamed louder. Not because I fought dirtier. But because I carried something she never could. Grandpa's truth. The weight of his estate was still heavy in my hands, but now it felt less like a burden and more like a gift. A responsibility. Legacy. That night I drove to the countryside. To Grandpa's workshop. The cedar smell greeted me like an embrace. I lit a lantern and spread his letters across the workbench. His handwriting, steady, patient, seemed to whisper through the room. Silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. Still water runs deep. Protect the legacy, but protect yourself too. I pressed my hands to the wood, tears slipping down my cheeks. I did it, Grandpa. They tried to break me, but I stood. And I'll keep standing. The weeks that followed were different. The whispers in town faded as the truth settled. The newspapers that had smeared my name printed retractions when the court records became public. Neighbors who had doubted me sent letters of apology. But more importantly, the estate began to grow under my stewardship. I restored Grandpa's farms, invested in local businesses, and set up scholarships in his name. Every step wasn't just about protecting his wealth. It was about honoring the man who believed in me when no one else did. And each time I signed a document, each time I made a decision, I heard his voice. You're capable, Sadie. Stronger than they'll ever admit. Clara, of course, tried to cling to the edges of the story. She gave bitter interviews, painted herself as the victim. But her words had no bite anymore. People had seen the truth. They had watched her greed unravel in front of the judge. And me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the background shadow. I didn't feel like bloodless Sadie. Felt like Sadie Wright, the rightful steward. The woman who turned grief into fire, betrayal into resilience, silence into strength. On the 1-year anniversary of Grandpa's passing, I visited his grave. I placed fresh lilies by the stone, smoothed my hand over his name, and whispered. They called me weak, Grandpa. They called me bloodless. But you knew better. And you were right. I didn't need to scream to win. I just needed to stand. A breeze stirred through the trees, and for a moment, it felt like he was there beside me, watching, proud. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. For the first time, I wasn't carrying grief like a stone. I was carrying strength.